Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to give just a few minutes for more people to join in, and then we'll get started. So thanks so much for joining us. If you have any questions while you're here, you can feel free to throw them in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from, where you're tuning in from, and we'll get going in just a few minutes.
I always find it so interesting to see where everyone says like which cities or even countries that they're joining from. It's always so fun, right?
I think we need to get one of those virtual boards where you can put a thumbtack in
great.
where you're coming from on the map.
That'd be pretty awesome. And then you could see it get updated in real time, all the little text dropping in.
Yeah. There's a business idea for you.
Yeah. If you just joined a second ago, we're just waiting one more minute to let people join before we get started. But go ahead, feel free to say hi in the chat. Patrick's going to mention in a moment, but we'll be using the chat throughout the webinar today to field questions. But feel free to say hi in the chat before we get started in a second here.
Looks like we have a global audience today, people all over the US, UK, Trinidad, Kenya, South Africa. So thanks everyone for tuning in.
I saw that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, pretty cool to see.
All right, looks like we have a pretty good audience tuned in at this point, and we'll let everyone else trickle in as they come, but let's get started. So hello, everyone, and thank you for taking some time out today to join Spark Hire and Workable for a webinar about optimizing the candidate interview experience. Today's webinar is scheduled for an hour, but it will likely be about 30 to 45 minutes long. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, so please leave any questions you have in the chat throughout the presentation, and you will also be emailed a recording of this webinar to watch later on. My name is Patrick O'Connell. I'm the Product Marketing Specialist at Spark Hire. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Spark Hire, it's a video interview platform used by more than 6,000 organizations in over 100 countries. Our one-way video interviews have helped organizations make their interview process 5 to 7 times faster while also making the process more collaborative. Spark Hire provides an integration with Workable so that users can leverage the main features of Spark Hire from within Workable's applicant tracking system to help make the right hires faster. Workable's recruiting software has helped 27,000 companies hire 1.5 million employees. We've collaborated with Workable in this webinar to help provide some educational and actionable content to help both you and your candidates enjoy a positive, efficient, and productive interview experience. I'm happy to introduce today's panelists. Today we have Spark Hire's own Jeremy Tolan, the Partnerships Manager, Melissa Escobar Franco, Vice President of People at Workable, and Jackie Cerny, Senior People Operations Specialist at Workable. Today's conversation is going to be about structuring your hiring process to be as positive and candidate-centric as possible while still remaining efficient in meeting your company's needs. In today's job market, candidates have so many options and unprecedented flexibility, so you can count on them being picky about their next career move. That means you need to be ready to move quickly, maximize your process efficiency, and put your brand on display in all the right places. So let's kick things off by talking about communication styles with your candidates. Melissa, can you share some tips that you use for personalizing communication with candidates throughout your hiring process?
Sure. And to start, I really don't think that there's one or two things that you can do that will make the biggest difference. It's mostly around the continuous engagement with your candidates in that entire journey. So from start to finish, how you're connecting with them, that initial reach out. So even that first email that you send or that first call, it's so important because it's the first introduction to your company that they're seeing. It's the, and Jackie, I know you always say this, it's the first friend that they have when they connect with the company. So you are not only introducing the company, yourself, the role, you're shepherding that process. So you're keeping the candidates informed on what to expect. So this is what we do here, and these are the activities that you could expect to come across as you move through the process. And then how you can best prepare for each step. And that's a huge role for us, and we take it really seriously. Some best practices that are more basic that I think can be helpful in the beginning, and that's around even the small things. So when a candidate first applies and you're engaging with them and interacting with them, and you note that they sign off their name as the shortened version of their name, so Mel instead of Melissa. A lot of these systems out there would just auto-populate the full name. So make sure that you kind of correct that in the system so you are paying attention. If candidates have entered in their preferred pronouns, use them. The other best practices, which I know it sounds basic, but it's really easy to get into skim mode or robot mode, where you might not always pay the closest attention to someone's cover letter, not fully read the resumes, not go to their LinkedIn page and checked out their professional background. Have a little bit of an understanding of their professional journey before you hop on those first calls. So those are just some small things. Now, with our team here, I'm always amazed and taken aback by the different hats that they have to wear. And on one hand, one hat is really analytical. Our recruiters are having to be objective and in how they are evaluating and assessing candidates as they come in. And then on the other hand, we're also playing almost like company tour guides. So we are introducing the company, we're introducing the role, the team that they're going to be working in, and again, providing that guidance throughout the entire process. And that's so important. And what we try to emphasize is that that communication is transparent, and also that throughout that process we are naturally becoming almost the candidate's champions, if that makes sense. So we are guiding them through, we are providing the information of what they can expect, we are providing guidance on what the interviewers are going to be looking for. And so as they move forward, we get excited. We're their champions. And for me, that speaks for itself in terms of that personalization. How much more personal can you get when you have someone on this end rooting for you? And that shows throughout the entire process with all those little things that I mentioned, the paying attention, the providing that information, and being that chaperone throughout the process.
Yeah, acting as that guide and just taking note of all those little things can make a huge difference for the candidate's experience right out of the gate. So thanks for sharing. Jeremy, what kind of things do you like to do to personalize your communications with candidates?
Yeah, first of all, thanks everyone again for joining. And I loved that overall approach, your mindset is it being like the tour guide or the candidate's champion. I think that's like the exact type of mindset that you need to have if you are going to be focused on providing an awesome candidate experience. A couple tips that I would have to help personalize your communication with candidates, something that we do a lot at Spark Hire, our own hiring process, and a lot of the organizations using Spark Hire do too, is incorporate video in their email communication with candidates. And something that has always stood out to me was a study from Lighthouse Research and Advisory, where they found that an initial email with the video receives an increase in click-throughs by 96%. And on top of that, viewers retain 95% of a message when they watch it in a video compared to just 10% when they read it in a text. So I think that really supports or backs the idea that you're going to have really high engagement by incorporating video into your communication with candidates. So a few ideas that I've seen work really well is that maybe when a candidate first applies and you determine you want to advance them to the next step of your hiring process, send them an email that includes a video. And in that video, you can congratulate them on making it to the next step of your process, explain what they can expect for that next part of the process too. Another example might be when a candidate's invited to a more final round interview. When you send them an email to invite them to that, include a quick video with what I call an employee testimonial. An employee testimonial is just asking one of your team members to record a quick video where they can explain what they really love about working at your organization, maybe some things they like about the role in particular that they work in. And those are super effective for candidates because they really get to see firsthand experience from like a peer, someone that might be doing the same role that they're being recruited for. So they're a really effective way to help personalize your communication with candidates. And then the last example that I'm thinking of too, as far as incorporating those videos in your email communication with candidates, is near the end of your hiring process. When you're ready to send an official offer in an email, think about including a video that's going to reiterate why you think the candidate's a great fit, how excited you are for them to join your organization, or you might even include a video that includes like a quick intro from the members of the team that they'd be joining. I think something like that can go a long way where the candidate is actually able to see and kind of meet members of that team that they would be joining and get really excited about becoming the next member of your organization.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. All those personal touches can certainly go a long way to making the candidate feel like they're wanted to be a part of that team. I do want to ask, though, on the flip side, I'm wondering if there are any challenges that may come along with all these personalizations, because there's a lot that goes into it. So Jackie, do you want to take this question? Have you encountered any struggles associated with this type of personalized approach?
Totally. I think it's important, like we want it to feel personal. Everyone's applied for a job where you're going to get an email back automatically in automation, and spending the minute to build those automations out. Yes, it's going to make the recruiter's life easier by having those automated emails, but building them in a thoughtful way so you reduce those challenges later on. But then also really being realistic with yourself and the candidates on how fast the hiring process is going, where things are going to be moving in the process. I think for me, when I'm hiring in entry-level positions, those positions can go really fast sometimes, and the candidate can feel like we're rushing through the process when really it's just the natural cycle of it. So on that first touch point with the candidate, I'm like, this could feel a little crazy. We can slow down if you need to, but we want to fill this position pretty quickly. There's a need here, and explaining the why we're moving fast to them. So they're not like, yeah, I applied for this job 2 days ago and I'm going to probably get an offer at the end of next week. They understand how quickly we're moving so that they know that it's not just a checkbox activity for us. Each candidate I want to have that personalized communication with. And then also challenges would be really making sure that we're getting them back feedback timely. Not everyone is going to be able to be hired by us. I truly wish I could hire everyone in the world because I hate declining people. But being able to deliver them feedback thoughtfully and really getting personalized feedback. I am our hiring manager's worst nightmare. I know I am when I'm knocking, begging them for more tangible feedback. I don't want like not just a good fit. I want like where they could have improved in the interview, how this could work better, areas that they think they could improve on, and delivering that to the candidate in a thoughtful way so that when we are saying like, hey, this isn't going to work out, but we have this feedback for you, it's something that they're going to be like, that makes sense to me, and it's not just it's not a great fit. So getting that timely feedback from hiring managers and making sure that it's tangible is really important for me.
Excellent. Yeah, putting these personal touches does sound like it can be a little timely. Melissa, do you experience that same type of obstacle or anything else that you like to watch out for?
And jumping on what Jackie was saying around the feedback, I think that's actually a really big or common challenge that hiring teams have to overcome and also prioritize. So I think it's important to set expectations at the beginning of the process when you are, doing your role role brief around setting expectations around the timeliness of when you're going to get back to people, and also the type of feedback that you're going to give. And I know Jackie mentioned this, as well. That comment of, oh, they just weren't a good fit, or, oh, we had stronger candidates in the pipeline. Oh, that's just not good enough. That's not good enough. And what we always say here is that one way to tell if we're doing a decent job in how we're treating our candidates is, how would you feel if you were in that seat? And if the answer is, ooh, I'd feel kind of crappy, then come on, you have to change what you're doing. So setting the expectations up front with your hiring team around what is acceptable feedback, which kind of lends into the importance of interviewer scorecards and understanding what each person is going to be evaluating, and having criteria that each candidate should meet on those areas. So it makes it easier and more objective to give that feedback. And and we're going to hold everyone accountable. Jackie's not lying when she says she's chasing up managers, in very obvious ways. It's in the ATS. We can all see it. So it's important to us because it's important to the candidates. And just because someone's not successful now doesn't mean that 6 months from now we're not going to have an opportunity that would be perfect for them.
Yeah, I think that's a great benefit of having that personalization, that if it doesn't work out, that they may still work out a little later on a different role. Jeremy, I'll kick it back to you for any last thoughts before we move on to the next question.
Yeah, these are all awesome points. I don't think I have a ton to add, but I think one of the main challenges when you're really focusing on personalizing your communication with candidates is that could potentially slow down your process. So you want to figure out ways that you can continue to add that personalization without delaying your hiring process. Just like you pointed out a moment ago, you might be thinking of ways that you can use automation, but use it thoughtfully. When I talked about using videos and email communication with candidates, most of those examples that I mentioned, they can be videos that you're reusing for every candidate that's applying for a specific position, but that communication will feel personalized if it's specific to that role that the candidate's applying for. Like if you're going to send a candidate one of those employee testimonial videos, send them one from an employee that's in the role that you're recruiting the candidate for. And then on top of that, I think it's really important too to figure out which tasks that you're able to automate to free up as much time as possible so that you really can focus on improving how personalized your communication is with candidates and other priorities of providing a really good candidate experience.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. So clearly, adding all that personalization to your communications can add a lot, but like everything else, you do need to find a good balance to avoid slowing things down in any way, because you need to keep up your hiring pace. So speaking of that hiring speed, there is a lot of technology out there that can help in the interview process. For this conversation, though, I'd like to hear about how you can leverage these technologies to create a favorable candidate experience. So Jeremy, do you want to kick us off on this question and tell us about how you use technology to create a positive hiring experience?
Sure. I already mentioned how Spark Hire and a lot of the organizations we're helping are incorporating videos in their email communication with candidates. Video interviews is the main feature that our software provides, and there's two types of video interviews that are really helpful for organizations. One of them is a one-way video interview where you're able to set up questions in advance that candidates record video response to, but they do it on their own time before a deadline you set for them. So it's really convenient, kind of more like a selfie type of interview. The other one's a live video interview, which I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, a little more similar to a web conference. And when you think about how that can improve your candidate experience, it's really giving a candidate an opportunity to put their best foot forward really early on in your hiring process. And it's also giving your team the opportunity to compare candidates on an even playing field. And in particular, if using a dedicated video interview solution that's purpose-built for hiring, that's going to make sure that you have a more cohesive experience for your candidates and a much more professional one too. Just as an example, you can include things like your logo, your colors, job description, and candidates can see all this information. They can see bits about your organization, pictures, and really get a feel for what it's like to work at your organization before doing a video interview with you, as opposed to maybe just like hopping on a web conference or asking a candidate to send you a few videos of themselves. A candidate could really go through an experience that's completely tailored to your brand and your hiring process. And what's really popular on Spark Hire too is using what's called intro and outro videos to make the experience feel super engaging for candidates. So before a candidate starts a video interview, they can see an intro video played where maybe a member of your team is making a quick introduction of the candidate. Maybe they're getting them excited about what it's like to work at the organization or letting them know what that video interview is going to be like. And then when they complete the video interview, they can also see an outro video where you can have a member of your team maybe thank the candidate for their time and explain more about what to expect as far as next steps following the video interview. So those are a couple of great ways to make the experience more engaging when you're using video interviews. But on to that, if you're using these one-way video interviews where candidates can respond to these on their own time whenever it's convenient for them, it's going to end up speeding up your hiring process quite a bit, where we found that on average, the companies that are using Spark Hire's one-way interviews, they've made their screening process 5 to 7 times faster. So using something like this is a great way to make sure that you're following up with candidates. You're having a much faster response time with them as far as next steps in your decision-making process for them. And another tool that's really helpful for improving your candidate experience is definitely applicant tracking. There's different automations you can set up, ways you can keep candidates' information organized. You can hold team members accountable to follow up with candidates in a timely manner. And I would encourage you to see how you can incorporate texting as far as sending reminders to candidates or information about next steps. But what's also important too is to make sure you understand early on in your process, asking candidates how they prefer to receive communication. Candidates are going to be really responsive to text messages. Other ones are watching their email like a hawk. Other ones might prefer to be messaged on LinkedIn. So make sure you learn about that from candidates too, so that you can have the best response times with them too.
Awesome. Those are all great points, Jeremy. Using those video messages can definitely help connect candidates with the actual team members and helps them feel like the company has already begun to invest time in them before you started. And then those automations are going to help keep the process moving along. And we all know that candidates want to move forward just as quickly as you do, so that's great. Melissa, what type of tech fits into your hiring process, and how are you using it to help the candidate experience?
So I think it goes without saying, any company, any person that's hiring, you need to have a robust ATS in place, like Workable, and there's others out there too. It's really going to help you do your job and do your job well. In terms of like some of the technology that we use within our ATS that I think is beneficial for both the hiring team and the candidates alike. Oh God, I feel like there's so many, there's a lot. Where do I even start? So if we go with like from the beginning of the process, why don't we start with job descriptions? We have thousands of job descriptions in the tool so that we don't have to start from scratch. It's not saying that it's going to one size fits everything. You're going to have to look at it and work with your hiring manager to determine how this needs to be fleshed out and how the job description template can be modified to fit the tone of your team. But it's a phenomenal place to start. Scorecards, I mentioned this earlier. Essentially what scorecards, if I didn't make it clear, what that is already built out lists of questions that will assess a certain thing. So if you want to narrow in on project management skills, you can find a scorecard that's pre-built that will have questions that are geared towards evaluating that specific skill set. They're really helpful, especially when you have multiple interviewers on a panel or like multiple interviewers at different stages. We've all been there. It is the worst thing when you go through an interview process and you're like, oh, that person asked the exact same questions that this other person asked, and so the one before them. And it kind of makes the candidate feel that either we're disorganized, which we don't want to come across, or that like we're not caring, like we don't care enough to have a clear evaluation process. So I think that's extremely helpful. And also we use assessments. So Assessments, if you don't know what they are pre-designed assessment tools that have been built by scientists, doctors, people way smarter than me, that you can send to candidates that will assess things like numerical reasoning, verbal comprehension. So those are extremely helpful when you have, like, say, a role in finance. So we want to make sure that for someone who's applying for a role in finance, that they are scoring at, at a certain level within the numerical reasoning. It's not a disqualifier by any means, but it's definitely another tool to help you make a decision in your process in a much more objective way. The other one that we've used that has been really, I'm babbling now, I'm sorry. So again, I told you I could talk for days. So the other one that we've used that was really interesting that we got some cool responses on were, for high volume roles, we found that we had good success using one-way interviewing, which I know Jeremy has spoken to on here as well. But we did notice that when we first introduced it, that candidates did seem to drop off at certain stages when they did come to the one-way interview time. And what the hiring manager did, she actually did the one-way interview herself as an introduction to those candidates. So she introduced herself, she introduced the team, she spoke to like what she's wanting to hear from their responses and how excited she was to listen to them. And when she took that personal step, the engagement and the drop-off decreased, and we ended up having more candidates stay in the pipeline. So those are just a few ways that we've utilized technology that have been incredibly helpful on our end, and I think also very beneficial to the candidates because it's an organized process.
My personal favorite way in Workable is the self-schedule link. I could sing its praises for the rest of my life. Everyone has been in that moment where you're trying to schedule an interview and your day gets busy, the candidate gets back to you at the time they're available, and you're like, somebody already booked me for that time. Sorry, can we reschedule? Like, we need to move this. The self-schedule link, I send it to the candidate, boom, they get it, and they book the interview with me within minutes of them getting it, and it's on my calendar. I don't have to think twice about it. And then when I get on the call with the candidates and I'm like explaining what Workable is, I'm like, and that's the Workable technology. Like, there's just a small minute of them seeing it and they're like, wait, that's so cool to see what the actual tool is doing. So it lets me highlight what our product does.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And Melissa, I really like that part of your story, how you're showing how it's so easy to find technology and sort of say this will make it more efficient. But if you lose that personal touch, people may not go through it. So having the hiring manager record that video and really make that great first impression, it helps the candidates kind of see behind the curtain, because nobody really wants to be left waiting or not knowing what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm sure the candidates really appreciate all of your explanations and transparency with the technology. So on that note, Jackie, I'm actually going to go back to you. Can you tell me a little bit about why it is so important to be transparent with your candidates about the interview process?
100%. I think it's one of the most important parts about being in the recruitment seat. You applied for a job to get into the recruitment seat, and you know those question marks, you know that timeline. And for Workable, I mean, when I applied, Melissa hired me. So I got an email from her with a document saying, like, this is what the process is going to be. And I was like, okay. And I'm going through it. And I was like, this is making way more sense. Like, the words that you use in your day-to-day, like, you're going to do an assessment and you've never heard that before. You're like, what's the assessment going to be about? It explains all of that in your first touch point with the candidate so that they can be like, okay, I'm understanding what's going on now. That's a huge part for me about that transparency. And then also building out that timeline of how long this process is going to take. So I'm always one to be like, you're going to talk to me, then the hiring manager, and I give like a little bit of information about who each person is in the process. So if someone was interviewing with Jane Doe, I'd be like, you're going to talk to Jane, and then she's going to go through X, Y, and Z about that position. And then you're going to talk to this person, and you're going to feel like he's not really like blinking, but like that's normal. That's him. Like, keeping it kind of lively so they know what they're walking into on a call. Like, not everybody's going to be like me giving you like cheers with every answer you give. And I call that out. The candidate always is like, thank you so much. But I think those parts of being transparent with them about the timeline is really important. And then following up with them, being like, hey, I know I said it was going to be Tuesday, but X, Y, and Z has happened since. We've had somebody go out, and being realistic with them. I think giving them a 30-second phone call to say, hey, we need to delay the process by a little bit is going to build that rapport with them more. This person hopefully will join your organization, and you want to build trust with them before they start at the organization. So really spending that time to gain their trust as a candidate will help you hopefully get a successful offer out to them.
Awesome. Jeremy, how about you? What are you hearing that organizations are doing to be more transparent with their candidates throughout the process?
Yeah, I think this is just so important because just put yourself in your candidate's shoes. Like, obviously, this is interviewing, applying for jobs can be a really stressful experience for candidates. So you want to set up an environment where you're trying to relieve that as much as possible, make candidates feel as comfortable as possible. So just be empathetic, really put yourself in their shoes when you approach putting together your hiring process. Think about, how can you make this convenient for your candidates? Are you making their life easier? And provide as much context as possible on what candidates should expect at the different stages of your process. You could do this even from the outset, just on the career section of your website. Just kind of outline the different steps that a candidate would go through throughout your process. And when a candidate applies, you could even give them a quick call to walk them through what to expect, what are the next steps going to be like, and always commit on timelines that you expect to get back to them within. And if you're not going to be able to meet that timeline, make sure to follow up with them still. Maybe send them a quick email, just let them know you need a few more days or however much time you need to make it to the next step of the process. And this has come up a couple of times too, but always make sure you're also following up with the rejected candidates that you're not going to advance to the next stage, because that can be such a frustrating feeling for a candidate when they never hear back from an employer. And those might be really great candidates, like a runner-up candidate that you might even want to consider in the future. So make sure you're giving respect and you're following up with those candidates too. And something that I'd really encourage that you do for your team members too is ask them to be involved in your process. Encourage them to connect with candidates that would be interested in speaking with a member of the team that they'd be joining. And having a candidate talk to a peer can be basically like the ultimate testimonial for your company, and a great way to kind of win that candidate over and have your organization stand out, and just kind of hear someone speak to what their experience has been like working for your organization and working in that role. So I think that's like another layer of transparency that you can add to your process too, is encourage your team members to connect with candidates that would be interested in speaking with a member of the team.
Yeah, I think that's huge, Jeremy. There's definitely been interviews where you meet with hiring managers and directors. You have no idea who you're going to be working with. So getting a chance to meet with those other team members would be a wonderful way to have transparency into what things would be like. And Melissa, I want to give you a chance. Any other points you'd like to add about transparency that you find are important?
And I think Jackie and Jeremy did a really nice job of speaking to the importance of it. Only one thing that I would add that we do here is we're holding ourselves accountable to the transparency too. So, and what I mean by that is it's actually on our performance reviews in terms of, how quickly are we getting back to candidates? Like, what are the touch points in between, as they progress in the process? What's the quality of the feedback that they're getting? So it's not just about, making yourselves look good. It's about just doing the right thing. And we care about it that much that we are rating ourselves against it too, because we want to do a good job there. The other piece around transparency that we haven't talked on that I did want to speak to very quickly, because I think it's cool to talk about what we're currently doing, and then also cool to share around, like, okay, what we're going to try. And one thing that we're actually working on trying is doing a better job at collecting candidate feedback. So there is transparency too around how are we doing in terms of their process and their experience? Did they get the information that they needed? Did they get it in a timely way? All those things that we feel like we're doing a great job on because we pat ourselves on the back and say, yay, we've done a great job. We're actually wanting to make sure that we are by getting that feedback from candidates as they move through the process through candidate surveys. So stay tuned. I can't tell you how we're doing yet. It's something that we're working on, but I think as part of this process, it's good to share about, how the things that we do and what we'd like to do and what we're working on.
Yeah, that's super important to keep on improving what you're doing, not just hoping it's working, but getting that real feedback from those that you're working with. So thank you all for sharing those tips about transparency during the hiring process. Now, we have one last question to get to with our panelists, but before we do, I want to share a poll with all of you. So please take a look at your screen, and it should be popping up now. It's going to ask if you'd like to receive any information from any of our participating panelists. So you can just select the answer that's best for you, and we'll be sure to get you connected with them after the webinar ends. So just take a look. I'll give you a second to answer that question on screen. All right, excellent. Looks like we've got answers coming in. So you can just keep on answering that as we move forward. All right. One thing that I do want to talk about is the brand that comes along with personalization as part of the hiring process, because branded moments throughout the process can make a huge impact on what a candidate thinks of their experience. So Melissa, can you talk about how organizations can really leverage their branding to attract the top talent and really provide that memorable candidate experience?
I think I was actually going to talk about the, your careers page and how you can really, showcase your personality as an organization. But I know, Jeremy, you're going into that a little bit. So I think I'll focus on, your hiring process. The way you hire is a huge part of your brand. And when we take a step back, what we're doing at that stage is we're introducing our company, we're introducing the role, but then we're also kind of setting expectations with candidates. We're saying, this is how we do things here. This is what you're going to do in this role. Here are the things that you're going to learn as an employee. Here's how you can grow. Here's your, the development path in the organization. Those are all the things that are discussed during an interview. Those are all the things that help candidates make those decisions in joining your company. Now, when you hire, that's the part where it gets really important to make sure that you are doing those things that you have promised. So, how is that onboarding? That's when onboarding comes into play. It's super critical. What is their training going to look like when they come on board? Again, how have we helped them grow in their career during their time here? And did we do the things that we said that we were going to do? If the answer is yes, that's when you're going to get higher employee engagement scores on your employee surveys. That's when you're going to get employees that talk about their company to their family, their friends. Those are the employees who are going to share content on social media and LinkedIn and share job postings. They're going to be the ones who make referrals, all that good stuff. And when you don't deliver on what you promised during your hiring process, that's when the reverse happens. That's when you're going to get those bad Glassdoor reviews. So I think your hiring process, in terms of how you are setting those expectations from day one in that first interaction, is a huge component into building your employer brand. And then alternatively, we do something interesting here as well, in that we're in tech, and we know that the average tenure right now is typically around 2 to 3 years. We're working really hard to get that number up here at Workable. We want to make sure our people are staying happy and here longer. But we also know the reality of the situation is that jobs are not for life anymore. And so what we've done is we have created the Workable Alumni. So it's a LinkedIn group, and anyone who has left the company is invited to join the Workable Alumni. And that's showing that, even though you're not here anymore, we still care about those relationships. We still value those relationships. We want to continue to, have some of those, alumni to be speakers on things that we do. We want to, make sure that they are kept up to date on some of the cool things that we're doing as well, because, they're still part of who we are and part of how Workable was built. And also, like, when we have new roles come up, we love a boomerang. We we want to have people come back, and we've had quite a few. We have really good success rate there. So I think all those things about, your current employees, your hiring process, and your alumni all build into your employer brand.
Yeah, those are excellent points, Melissa. I think you called to some great things, because like a logo, swag, all those things are fun and good, and that is brand. But also, if you're creating an environment that fosters growth, that fosters networking and lifelong learning, people care about that, and that really needs to be part of your brand that is shown. So thank you for sharing that. Jeremy, how about you? What ways do you see companies incorporate their branding into the hiring process, and how does that create a great first impression for them?
Yeah, what I've noticed is that if you're doing all these things really well that Melissa was just talking about, there might be candidates that end up being rejected, but then they end up referring other candidates to your organization because they're like, I just had this amazing experience interviewing for Workable. You should check them out, see if there's any roles that you'd be interested in. And you might be surprised if you ask candidates how they heard about your organization. They say, I knew someone else that interviewed for you guys. They didn't end up working there, but they didn't have enough they had so many great things to say about their experience and what they learned about your organization just throughout the hiring process. So I think these things really go a long way. A few tips that I might have is, you always hear that phrase, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I think it's important that candidates are able to see pictures of your team members, maybe the spaces that they would be working in. You can include this in the career section of your website. You might have a corporate Instagram page where you're keeping that up to date. You could have this as part of like a video interviewing candidate experience, or even in certain email communication with candidates that could be appropriate too. I think articles on external websites could be really valuable also, and you could share those with candidates throughout the hiring process. And those are effective because they're positioned from a third party. These could be like press releases about your organization's announcements that are going to get candidates excited. And then Glassdoor was mentioned a moment ago too. I think that's usually one of the first places that candidates are going to research an employer, try to look at more information about what it's like to work there. So really make sure you check out what your presence is like on Glassdoor, so that you know that you are putting your best foot forward. And I talked about including video in your email communication with candidates. So definitely encourage you to do that at different stages of your process to continue that excitement that candidates have for working at your organization. And as an example, usually kind of towards the end of our hiring process, we'll send an email after a final round interview that includes pretty much all the things that I just mentioned. We usually link to an external site, an article that's on there that helps showcase our company culture. We also like to include some customer reviews from a popular review site, because what we found is that candidates actually get really excited to see what do the customers that you're serving think about your organization, and seeing really positive feedback gets them really excited about the opportunity to work for your organization. And we've also included kind of an informal picture of the team the candidate would be joining, so they can start picturing themselves as the next member of the Spark Hire family. One way that we've done that is maybe just taking a screenshot during a team meeting, like on Zoom, and then it's got kind of like everyone's happy face on there, friendly faces. So you kind of have a cool opportunity for a candidate to see what the team is like, and to see people interacting in a group setting, and kind of envision themselves as the next member of your organization.
Yeah, it sounds like so many of the things that you're all pointing out, it just means you're being proactive about putting yourself out there for the candidate to see. And I'll add too, on Glassdoor, I know in my experience, if you see a company that you're hiring or you're trying to get a job with, if there's negative reviews from other people, it makes a world of difference if that employer makes a response that's reasonable and invites them to have a conversation, versus just a list of lots of negative ones. So just putting yourself out there and being proactive about managing your brand is so important. Jackie, any last thoughts you'd like to share about branding best practices? Oh, looks like you're muted, Jackie. Oh, technical difficulties. Okay. All right, we're just going to move on to the next one. Sorry about that. We'll get back to you, Jackie.
I think it might be working again if you try to unmute one more time. Oh, not. But yeah, maybe you just try disconnecting and reconnecting the microphone, but we can keep moving too. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you anyway, Jackie. And thank you all so much for your insights and information about optimizing the candidate interview experience. And so at this point, we would like to open up the audience. I've seen a couple of questions pop in and I've marked them, but please, if anyone else has questions for our panelists, please drop them in the chat and we'll try to get these answered for you. And I see a couple coming through right now. So let's kick it off with the first one. Someone writes that they've seen candidates coming into interviews being less professional, showing up late, arriving in t-shirts, drinking the beverages during the interview. How do you avoid such behavior, or what would you do in those instances?
Sure. I think the best way to modify behavior in this case is to help prepare them when they get for the next stage. So instead of pointing out, during the interview with you, like, oh, how dare you do that in front of me on an interview? I think a better way to approach it is, as you progress in the process, normally, typically, we won't do this on our interviews. This interviewer in particular doesn't want to have people drinking on calls. So those are a couple things that will help better prepare you to be successful, not only in an interview, but also in terms of, how we operate here. So I think coming at it as a teaching moment to help them better prepare for the next step.
Jeremy, anything to add there?
Not a lot. I'd echo what you just said. I think setting those expectations of what you're looking to see and how to go into the interview and really set your candidate up to succeed by laying those out for them before they meet with you in the interview, I think is really helpful tip. And just be empathetic towards your candidates too. Think about what they're going through. Make sure you're balancing that with maybe not making too many rules or putting too much pressure on the candidate also. But yeah, just make sure you're clear about what you're expecting and how to be professional in that interview when you meet with them.
Sure. We've got a similar question. I think it's along the same lines. Someone asks if an HR manager becomes biased against a candidate based on how they perceive the candidate's appearance or dress code, even if it's inappropriate or not, if the hiring manager just has a bias, they want to know actually from the candidate's perspective how they should react in such a scenario.
Sure. So I think in this case, and it's funny because sometimes I have to work with my team because my team, we tend to love everyone, and when someone is pushed forward in the process, I know Ileana, one of our recruiters, is devastated. And I think one of the way of removing bias, either both, kind of positive or negative, is to rely on those scorecards that you have in place. So have those objective areas, those criteria that you are measuring in the process. So remove external opinion out because you're looking at these 6 things that you're evaluating. And that's how you can compare candidates across the board.
All excellent points. Jeremy, do you want to add that or head on to the next question?
I would really echo that. I think it's just the importance of being aligned with your team on what are you evaluating your candidate on and really hone in on those things to make sure that the candidate possesses those competencies, skills, background, all those things. And just set those clear expectations of how you expect them to be dressed and prepared for the interview.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. All right. I've got another question. I think this was touched upon a little bit in the presentation, but let's revisit it. Someone writes, I have 2 great candidates right now, but I can only fill 1 position. I know that I'll have another open role in about 3 months and don't want to lose that second candidate. How can I keep their trust that I will actually come back to them in 3 months and do my best to fill them in that role?
Jeremy, why don't you go first? I feel like I've been jumping in. You go.
Okay. I think the key is just having that consistent communication and being transparent with that candidate that, you can only hire 1 candidate for this role. You were really interested in them as a candidate. So you do foresee there being an opportunity in the future. You're hopeful that you're going to be able to get them in a couple of months and then, but just have that consistent communication with the candidate, keep them updated in that time in between. Don't necessarily, if the role is going to be open again in 3 months, don't wait until it's 3 months later to reach out to the candidate again. you're going to want to have communication in between now and then to let them know that you're still thinking of them. You still expect the role to be coming up in a couple of months, open again, but just have that consistent communication with the candidate.
I agree. I think the only thing that I would add, and sorry if you already said it, is set up that meeting now. Get it on the calendar. Make sure you've got that, that conversation booked 3 months from now, so you can hit the ground running if you've got the green light at that time fairly quickly.
Awesome. Thank you both. I did see a couple questions come in, one that was specific to Spark Hire, so I might actually reserve that until a later point. We can connect you. It's a product question. But someone else writes, do you find that some candidates shy away from video questionnaires?
Yeah, I think we had a good anecdote come up related to this earlier, and I think it's all dependent on how you're implementing this into your recruiting process. So you don't want to just blindly send out a video interview to a candidate to do without having any communication with them. They might not know very much about your organization yet. They might not be all that excited about your open opportunity yet. Make sure you have a chance to connect with them first, so that you can make the experience a little bit more personalized for them. Make sure they know what to expect. And even from the outset, make sure they knew that that was going to be a stage in your hiring process before they even applied, that they would be doing a video interview. And try to incorporate these different ways to get a hiring team member in front of a candidate, whether that's like a quick intro video they could see before they do the video interview, or maybe you're incorporating something called video questions, where you can actually record yourself on video asking the questions. So the candidate still almost feels like there's someone on the other end. It feels a little bit more personalized or natural for the candidate. But just make sure you're having that communication and personalization with how you're inviting a candidate to do a video interview.
All right, anything to add in there, Melissa?
I think I touched on this very quickly. I think the personalization piece is key. The example that I shared earlier was we did experience a little bit of drop off, but then when we had the manager do the video themselves and introduce themselves and explain their thought process behind the one-way interview, it definitely turned things around, and it felt more, like I said, personalized, and it made more sense to candidates that way afterwards.
Sure. All right, I'm going to ask one last question that popped in the chat, and then we'll wrap things up. What are your thoughts on texting candidates? Does it create efficiency or create inconsistencies within the process?
I think, for us, it does also tie into our ATS, so it's easy to keep it organized. And also, it comes back to kind of preference with the candidate as well. If that's their preferred mode of communication, it's our role to kind of make it easier and streamlined. And, it comes down to what is going to work best in terms of organization. Does it work in your current process and pipeline? And what's the preferred method of communication with those candidates?
Excellent. Jeremy, do you have thoughts there?
I mean, I entirely agree. I think just confirm that candidates want to be texted or are comfortable with being texted. And if so, I think it is really efficient. I think it's the most, I don't know if in your face, it's the most obvious, like quick response that you're going to get. Like everyone usually has their cell phone on them. It vibrates in your pocket and it's right there and you have all the information you need. So as far as like keeping candidates up to date, sending them reminders, letting them know about next steps, I think that's a really efficient method to do that.
Awesome. All right, thanks so much everyone for writing those questions in. We really appreciate that. If there's anything else that we didn't get to be answered, we're gonna have some contact info to share in just a moment. So that's gonna wrap it up for now. And like I just said, please feel free to contact our panelists later if you think of any questions that you didn't ask here today. So once again, thanks so much for attending today's webinar. Thank you to our panelists. Sorry we dropped off Jack at the end there, but made it most of the way. So you can see their contact info here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And we will get this webinar recording emailed out to each of you, and we'll hope to see you all at the next Spark Hire webinar. So thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.